All right, it's a minute or so after 5. I think we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to our Lewis Thompson Road Tightline virtual public meeting. Thanks everyone for taking the time out of your evening to be here. We look forward to sharing project update with you, getting some real-time feedback so you can see what your neighbors are saying about this project as we continue to move forward with design. As we get started, we're going to do a quick round of introductions and then kind of talk through some meeting logistics for tonight. And then Jed, Maria, and I will be walking through this presentation, and we'll finish with some Q&A. I can get us started. Harrison Price. I'm on the consultant team for this project, and personally mostly work in the public involvement space. So meetings like this, the survey that some of you may have seen, and really appreciate everyone being here.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jed Ireland, project manager for the City of Sammamish Public Works.
Good evening from me too. I'm Maria Paraki with Osborne Consulting. I'm the project manager for the consultant team, and I'm also leading the stormwater design.
Perfect. So for tonight's meeting, I don't know how many of you have been able to participate in virtual meetings over the past couple of years, but they definitely evolved. So we've got a Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen. If you have questions during the presentation, encourage you to send those in. We'll get to live Q&A towards the end of our meeting. If you have any access needs, let us know in the chat. We've got a couple folks behind the scenes monitoring that. So if technical issues arise, feel free and reach out. The other thing that we'll be doing tonight is using a Mentimeter survey, which is gonna allow us all to hear your feedback in real time. So to start us off with that, this will be our first survey question, just kind of get you familiar with how the tool is used. Up on the screen, there's a QR code. If you scan that, it'll take you to the survey page where we'll be able to, where you will be able to share how you heard about this meeting. We'll have a couple of these opportunities throughout the event tonight. So we'll give folks a minute or so to share with us how you heard about this meeting, and then we can flash those results up and then get started. All right, we'll switch over screens here. Thanks everyone for engaging with us through this tool. Looks like a lot of people heard about this through the mailer. I know we've got the boards out on Lewis Thompson. Glad to see that people have seen those. Feel free and keep sending those in. This is great information for us to plan for future events like this, and also make sure that we're putting the right information out there in the right places to continue hearing from all of you. Right. Jump back to the presentation. Again, there'll be a couple more opportunities like that to provide more specific input on design. But to get us started with tonight, just going to quickly walk through the agenda before handing it over to Jed to talk through the project. We've done a quick welcome. Jed will talk through project background and goals. Maria will be reviewing the design alternatives. Throughout that, there'll be a couple of opportunities to share your feedback via that survey tool we just used. Then we'll talk through project schedule, do a quick Q&A. Looks like we've already got a couple of questions from attendees, so keep sending those in. Again, down at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A box that you can send us questions through, and we'll talk through the next steps on the project. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jed to get us into the project background.
Thanks, Harrison. I'll start with a high-level overview of the project and how it originated. This is the Lewis Thompson Tightline project. So the stormwater component is in the name. That was the beginning of the project and how it was initiated. It came from the 2018 Zaccoos Basin Plan. This was the highest priority rated project in the basin plan, and The reason it was the priority is because of flooding issues, erosion, and the desire to keep sediments out of Zaccoos Creek, because it's number one, just one of the items is that it's an important fish habitat, fish spawning habitat, but also the flooding and erosion and some of the undermining that's happening for the road just from the way that the stormwater functions in the existing ditches and outfalls. Why we're here tonight, though, is to focus on, while we're building these storm improvements, which are largely funded, should we look at doing non-motorized features at the same time? And those are not currently funded, and so this would be a big decision for council to make. That's why we're looking for your feedback. Now, looking at the map that's shown here, is that you can see that the limits are from East Lake Sammamish Parkway up to 210th Place Southeast. The cost estimates that we're looking at are primarily over this section, although the basin plan did make it into discrete pieces based on palatable, fundable projects. But we're going to be looking primarily at the entire project. One of the things to consider is that the East Lake Sammamish Trail is going to start its next phase. June 1st, they'll be constructing the phase that will include a pedestrian ramp and walkway from the base of Lewis Thompson Signal down to the trail. And so if we were to build non-motorized features, that would work nicely. Those improvements for the King County Parks is building those are going to be constructed at the end of 2023 is the plan right now. So that's why we're looking at it today. We're really looking at what are we going to share with council as they make a decision on the scope. What cross-section do we want? What non-motorized features? I'll be presenting that to council on May 17th at the council meeting. So in addition to your comments here that we'll be collecting and I'll be sharing at that meeting, you could also go the Friday before that meeting. The agenda will be published on the city website, and there you can sign up for making comments. And you'll be able to record a public comment, make a public comment, or you could also send an email directly to a council member. So take a look at that. That's on the city website under government, agendas, and meetings. And if you look at the calendar, you'll just click on May 17th. And the Friday before, there'll be materials there for you to link up and make your comments for that meeting. But this is a great opportunity right now to include your comments in this meeting, and then also the survey that is found on the city website, specifically on Connect Sammamish, that many of you may have looked at. Why are we showing these specific alternatives? We'll get to why we're showing what we're showing. Essentially, council wanted us to communicate that it's not funded for us to do any non-motorized features. And so we started with the stormwater only, and then we built incremental features up to what would be a typical arterial road section on half the street. The reason we picked the downhill side is because that's where the ditches are. We already have to remove the ditches and put in storm. And so that would be the logical place to put in sidewalks and bike lane and potentially planter strip. The reason we're not looking at the other side is because it's not funded, and the uphill lane, there's guardrail and steep slopes, and it's much more expensive to widen on that side of the road. So that's why we're not looking at that specifically. Let's see here if there was anything. Yeah, and then I think that's it for the overview. I would turn it over to Maria, unless there's something, Harrison and Maria, that I forgot to mention.
No, I think we're ready to go into the alternative cross sections.
Before we get into those, we want to ask you all another question. And this one is, in addition to the stormwater improvements that Jed just talked through, how important are these optional design features to you? So in this survey, you'll see an updated question now where you can rank each of these 4 design features. And once folks have a chance to scan this QR code or go to the link down at the bottom, we'll jump over to the results and see what folks had to say. All right, we're starting to see results come in, so I'm going to change what we're sharing. Take a look at these. So it looks like the vast majority of people are saying sidewalks are the thing that's most important to them. That's followed up by bike lanes, planter strips. Rumble strips and planter strips are in a dead heat there for third and fourth, but sidewalks are staying first. And again, once Maria gets into the specifics of the design alternatives, we'll talk a little bit more about what sidewalks would mean for this project. So thanks everyone for participating there. We'll get back over to our presentation. I'll hand it to Maria.
Thank you, Harrison. So I'm going to walk you through the conceptual cross-sections that we developed for the 5 alternatives. And if you have already participated in the survey on the Connect Sammamish website, then you should be familiar with that. These are the exact same cross-sections that you can find on the survey. The first alternative includes only stormwater improvements, which is the main scope of the project, the approved scope of the project so far. So for that alternative, we're showing basically an curb and gutter on the north side of the road against that existing hill slope, and then filling the existing ditches with some soil and then seeding on the top. Most of our drainage structures, if not all, are going to be on the north side with our pipes, our catch basins, and everything being on that side. This alternative doesn't include any non-motorized improvements, so the south side of the road sees no changes. The baseline cost for that project, for that alternative to be constructed, is about 4.5 million. Next. Okay, so the second alternative, so you will see that we have gradually added the non-motorized improvements. So each alternative adds something different. So this second alternative adds the sidewalk. You can see the sidewalk is on the north side, is approximately where the existing shoulder is now. So we have the sidewalk, the curb and gutter again, and our storm structures on the north side of the road. Just to orient everyone, I should have done that in the previous cross section. The travel lane on the right is the one that is going uphill, so towards 210th place, and the travel lane on the left is the one that goes downhill towards is Lake Sammamish Parkway. So for this one, if you can go back, we are just building a sidewalk where the existing shoulder is, and the approximate construction cost would be 6.2 million. Okay, so this is the third alternative, and this one adds a rumble strip on the south side. And it may not be, we called it rumble strip in our concept alternatives, but it won't be your typical rumble strip that you see on the side of the highways. It might be something more like an embossed fog line, just something that provides a warning of the drivers if they're crossing that fog line, especially when there is a bend. That is to accommodate any users of that shoulder, that is a bicycles or a pedestrian, and make sure they get an extra layer of protection if they're using the existing shoulder in the south. The cross section on the north side looks exactly the same with the alternative 2. So for this one, the approximate cost would be 6.24 million. So very close to alternative 2 because we're just adding the markings, the paint on the south side. Alternative 4 adds a bike lane. So what that includes is where the existing shoulder is, we'll be adding a marked bike lane that's on the downhill side, and then that will push the sidewalk further into the hill slope. So that project, you will see, has a cost of 8.04 million approximately, and that is mostly because by moving that sidewalk towards the hill slope, we create additional needs for walls that they were not previously needing in the other alternatives. So that increases both the design cost and the construction cost, and also increases the needs for flow control. And what I'm saying about flow control is there is a requirement for every project by the Department of Ecology and by King County if it adds new impervious area, meaning any concrete or asphalt areas where previously it was just soil or vegetated areas. Then there is a certain threshold above which the project needs to provide flow control. Basically install facilities that will regulate the flow rate from those new areas. So by moving that sidewalk further in, we're basically moving it from the existing shoulder, which is an existing impervious surface, to over the existing ditch, which is now soil and grass. So that triggers the requirement for the project to add flow control facilities within the right-of-way. And that is what increases the cost for this alternative. Everything else remains the same. We're just adding the bike lane for this one. And this is the last one, which adds the last element for non-motorized improvements, which is the planter strip that is added between the bike lane and the sidewalk. Again, we're on the north side of the road. It's going to be a 5-foot planter strip, and the approximate cost for that cross-section to be built will be a little bit over 10 million.
Great, thanks, Maria. So next up, we've got another question for all of you. As we've got this up on the screen, just a quick reminder that if you've got questions for us, you can drop those down in the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen. But for this question, we're asking which of the current design alternatives do you prefer? And no worries, you don't have to remember what each one was. We'll have that on a slide after this, and then we'll jump to the results. Give folks a couple seconds, though, to get into the Mentee question. And if you're already in there, it will jump to the next slide so you can see that question. Looks like we're starting to see some results. I'm going to switch over to different alternatives here. Above each of the images, you'll see just a quick summary of the descriptions that Maria walked through. So as a reminder, alternative 1 is that stormwater only improvements. Alternative 2 is stormwater improvements plus the sidewalk. 3 adds a rumble strip. 4 puts in that bike lane. And then alternative 5 is all of those plus a planter strip. Looks like some folks are putting some thought into this question. We're seeing results start to roll in. So we'll leave these up on the screen for another half minute or so, and then we'll jump over to the results, see what folks are saying.
Oh, Harrison, I had a quick question. Some people are having trouble with the QR code, or they're getting the old questions. Do they have to go in order? Or are these all unique QR codes that should take them to the latest question?
If folks are on old questions, it should update automatically. If you're continuing to have issues, you can get back in, but it looks like we've got most folks have taken this survey question. So I'll jump over there to the results now. This is what folks are sharing. Alternative 1 just has 1 person. Sounds like there's a handful for 4. Alternatives 3 and 4 are the ones where most people have consolidated their votes, and then just the 1 for alternative 5. So we've got 1 more. So thanks everyone for sharing those answers there. Again, these questions mirror what you may have seen on our design alternative survey on the Connect Sammamish site. So look forward to adding this feedback in and continuing to add to the amount of public input we have. Right. We'll switch back over to the presentation, get into the project timeline. Okay, so this project kicked off in Q1 of 2022. Right now, we're in Q2 2022, where we're having this first public meeting, and also the preferred alternative will be selected by City Council, as Jed mentioned, on the 17th.
Moving from that, we are going to move to 30% design, and the scope of the project will be finalized and defined in Q3 of 2022, meaning that that will be the final step in order to know what we're going to be building at this phase of this project. At that around the same time, there's going to be the second public meeting in order to keep you informed on what the decisions that were made were. And then we're going to be moving into the 60% design in Q4 of 2022, 90% design in Q2 of 2023, all the way to 100% design in Q3 of 2023. Construction is now estimated to start at around Q1 of 2024, and depending on the scope of the project, it could have a duration of up to 15 months, basically.
Thanks, Maria. So next up, we've got our Q&A portion. We've got a dozen plus questions so far from attendees. So we're gonna start to talk through some of these. The first two are a good segue out of that schedule that Maria just shared. The first one is whether there's any difference in expected construction time between the different alternatives.
So I'll address that. You know, we haven't done a detailed analysis of what the construction time would be. Generally speaking, at this point, since we're just trying to decide the section, there wouldn't be a tremendous difference between the elements. However, council could decide to break it up into smaller lengths, and that could potentially reduce the construction time. But I think 15 months is probably a realistic marker for now for us to use as a working schedule.
Perfect. Thanks, Jed. And then so similar question for design. Just a question about what goes into design, why the schedule we have here.
Well, part of the design is that we are scoping as we go. We do have long-range plans, but they only demonstrate building a standard road section. Because we haven't looked at the corridor in the past, we're kind of doing the corridor study as we go. And so we need good feedback with council, we need to meet with the public. And so there's a little bit of a lead time for each of those connection points. In addition to that, the right-of-way and the permitting have to meet certain standards, partly because we have federal grant funding with this project. And so that adds time to the project. And so we are conservative probably with the 15 months, but oftentimes when you need right-of-way or you need permits, when you're doing work around streams, then a lot of that takes time. So that's also part of the design process.
Thanks, Jed. We've got a couple questions specifically about sidewalks. I'll ask them just in order. First one is why does the sidewalk need to be 6 feet? Why is it that width?
No, 6 feet is a city standard. Of course, we could change that with what's called a deviation. But 6 foot is it's our standard width for arterial roadways like this corridor. And we think that if we build it, we think that there might be enough pedestrian traffic to warrant the 6 foot. In addition to that, you need a certain amount of width just for putting out trash cans. I believe that Tuesday is trash can day. And so I think that trash cans are also going to be up against the curb. We want to keep those out of the bike lane. And so there's a certain amount of width just to navigate that. And we might look at widening the sidewalks even at the locations where people have to put trash cans. So just because of the arterial and the traffic volumes that are expected and the use, 6 foot seems appropriate based on city standards.
Great. Staying on sidewalks for a second, we've got another question about connections to what would be potentially sidewalks on Lewis-Thompson. Jed, do you know if there's projects in place or plans to make those connections to ensure that there aren't any gaps in that safety infrastructure?
So currently this project is just the limits that we've shown. It would be about 900 feet on the downhill side before you connect to the first uphill sidewalk that was connected as part of a development. This project's not going to fill that gap. And partly it's because projects have to have discrete limits just to be funded. The city does have another program, a non-motorized improvement program, where we look at filling in gaps to the sidewalk system. And those are things that we seek funding partners for from grants to try to fill in those gaps. And so that this project, it seems to meet the limits primarily for the storm. And that's why we've picked these limits, but it would not complete it. There would still be further sidewalk gaps going up into 212.
And then another kind of question on sidewalks and crossings, actually. So questions here about, you know, folks that live on the uphill side of the road, on the south side there. What kind of options would they have to cross into their driveways from sidewalks on the downhill side of the road?
Well, typically in this situation, there is a crossing where you have intersections. And so probably, as residents do now, they would walk on the shoulder and then look for an advantageous crossing where there is good visibility. Unfortunately, because of the constraints, it's difficult to improve that. And in this location, because we don't have signalized intersections or things like that, we're not looking to have striped crosswalks. And the reason is that if those people get habituated to those, and so this is not an appropriate location probably to have striped crosswalks, but there will be areas where the visibility is better that would be an appropriate crossing to make use of the sidewalk.
Jed, you mentioned some things about safety there. There's a couple of questions in here about plans for the speed limits on Lewis Thompson. Would there be any considerations as part of this project or any other things going on at the city right now that could change from the current 35-mile-per-hour speed limit?
I'm not aware of any plans to change the speed limit.
On there. There's a few questions here as well from folks about property impacts. Actually, both property impacts and impacts to the surrounding environment. So two questions here, really. One is what kind of property impacts would be expected? And then two, what types of impacts to trees would be expected?
Okay, well, Maria might be able to queue up some of the roll plots. So we've identified the trees, some trees that would be impacted. And I saw that someone had a question that there was some white tags to trees. I don't know if that was things were identified by our survey team or if that's related. But the roll plots will show what the issues are. I'll start with the right-of-way. If you look at the prominent corner that's up on this map, I think that's the area where we probably have the most right-of-way impacts. Actually, it's actually further to the right, because I see that the north is a little bit skewed on these maps, but you can see where the road was constructed outside of the right-of-way. Means the road prism is already outside the right-of-way. So by putting in sidewalk widening, we would be acquiring additional property and potentially building walls in this case. This one at Thompson, or actually, the street name is not properly identified on the roll plot. But in that case, then the city would be looking at acquiring additional right-of-way in order to place a sidewalk in the street right-of-way. And then the trees, I think Maria might be able to zoom in and look at what the tree impacts are. This is the maximum extent. So this would be the worst case scenario, I believe, this roll plot. And so I think there are some identified trees that would come out because of widening on to the north, generally the north.
If I may add to this answer, some other impacts within private properties, and it might not be within the private properties, it may still be within the right-of-way, but there might be a need for regrading of some of the driveways that lead down to Lewis Thompson because of the addition of the sidewalk and putting the new driveway entrances associated with the sidewalk. There might be some regrading on the existing driveways that it may extend outside of the right-of-way depending on the slope of the existing driveway. And then in terms of trees, as Jed mentioned, it depends on the cross-section that is going to be selected. For alternatives 1 through 3, I don't think there are that many trees that need to or any that may be impacted. But for 4 and 5, as we push into the hill slope and we create the need for walls coming closer to those root zones, there might be some trees that they need to be removed for the project.
Great. Thank you both. We'll transition to talking about bike lanes. I know at the start of the meeting here in project overview, Jed talked a little bit about why bike lanes are where they are. It's a tongue twister. Couple questions in here about bike lanes. One being why on the downhill side. I think there's a comment that it may be safer or better used on the uphill side. And the other question was whether that bike lane would be a one-way or whether folks could use it as a two-way.
Well, the bike lane would be a one-way. And so people going uphill that want to use the shoulder, they would be using, they'd be using the shoulder to bike. And so what we've proposed on this is the rumble strip idea would be essentially an embossed plastic stripe that would be the fog line. And it would alert motorists that they're encroaching into the shoulder to add a certain level of separation for the bikes that are going up. Generally, that shoulder is 5 feet or more, but there are locations where it's less than 5 feet. And so in that, we would propose to look at specific widening on specific areas where we don't have the 5-foot shoulder existing between the fog line and the guardrail or the existing driveways that are on the uphill direction. And then was there another part to the question? Oh, why did we put the bike lane on the south side? You know, bike lanes are part of the city standard, you know, and so it makes sense for us because we're trying to limit the cost, because council's direction is that the no cost or the no additional cost is a real consideration in this case, because non-motorized improvements are not funded. And therefore, with that premise, we're looking at building one side in order to limit construction and walls on the other side, because the other side has extremely steep locations. And so it solves problems by limiting the design to one side and treating the storm and the detention along with the side where you're doing the widening of the bike lane. And I do recognize that going uphill, people would like extra width. Bikes would like extra width because the closing speeds are more significant between motorists going uphill and a bike going uphill. That's true, but our goal would be to provide 5 feet in that shoulder up there. And so I think it's a trade-off, looking at the high cost and the fact that it's not funded. But of course, your comments are welcome and will be shared with council.
Thanks, Jed. We'll transition. We've got a handful of questions on environmental considerations and stormwater flows and control. First one being about septic, since it's the comment is that there's a lot of houses on Lewis Thompson that are likely on septic. If there's any thought to whether this might be an opportunity to put in some additional infrastructure to connect those houses to sewer systems.
You know, we have reached out to the Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District, and they are interested in upgrading the sanitary sewer system in this area. And so that would likely be a part of it. And that's a further discussion and coordination we can have with them on what their plans are to get people off of septic. That's probably a bigger question, but they are planning on building the main line through here, through the construction zone as part of this project. So that's something we can follow up on and see what Sammamish Plateau has in store for sanitary sewer.
Okay. And staying on water topics for a minute, there's two questions here about Zacchaeus Creek. The first one being whether the goal of the project is to increase, decrease, or result in no change in the flow into Lake Sammamish, and whether that's being measured with these different alternatives.
Yeah, so I think Maria, maybe this is something that you'd like to address.
Yes, certainly. So what we're doing as part of this design is that we're looking at not making anything worse. So keeping it at existing conditions or better if we could. So depending on the alternative that will be selected and how much new impervious area might be added in the corridor, we're going to be meeting requirements and providing flow control for the project so that we're not increasing any of the flows to Sakus Creek or to the Lake Sammamish beyond what is required from the permits. In terms of maintain existing conditions, also we're trying to maintain the existing flow paths. There are wetlands along Sakus Creek that they do receive flows from Lewis Thompson and from the cross culverts that they're located, especially on the upper part of the corridor, and we're maintaining those, providing some water quality where we can, and then ensuring that they're just going back to the existing flow path. So we're trying not to disturb any of the hydrologic balance in the Sakus Creek, but at the same time, not to make anything worse by introducing additional flows.
A similar related question about the kokanee salmon in Lake Sammamish. Has there been any consideration or thought put into how this project and those kind of stormwater improvements may impact the kokanee salmon?
So I think that the thought for this project is that we are going to be reducing significantly the erosion and the sediment load that leaves the Lewis Thompson corridor. So basically by tightlining and eliminating those ditches as you are driving up and down, you can see the erosion happening within them. We're going to be significantly reducing how much sediment is going to be leaving through those outfalls, which eventually would end up into the creek. We're also going to be adding water quality facilities wherever we can, so that we can improve the water quality of any runoff that leaves the roadway.
Thanks, Maria. We had a couple of kind of logistical questions. One about project funding. Question simple: how is the project funded?
So right now, that's a good question. I'd like to mention our funding partners. One of them is a federal grant. It's the American Relief Program Act, or ARPA. Maybe I have the P wrong, but I think it's the American Relief Act. And so that's contributing about $2.9 million for this project. The other grants that we have are about $600,000 from two different grants from King County Flood Control District. And that's most of the funding right now. And so when we look at the non-motorized features, then they'd be coming out of probably what would be the general fund. Funds that are not yet committed to a capital project, but that's something that council has the authority to do. And if they were to add features to this, then it would be part of the next biennium budgeting process where they would commit some of those monies to this capital project. So anything above 3.5 million will have to be committed as part of the next biennium.
Great. Thanks, Chad. Another question on the landscape strip this time. Questions whether that landscape strip does anything for the project or the area besides just the aesthetic improvements.
Yeah, I would say that, generally where you have high traffic volumes and you have pedestrians, pedestrians tend to like a buffer between them and traffic. They are obviously aesthetically, this corridor doesn't need more trees. And so we'd be looking at shrubs in that case or something like that. They can create habitat in kind of an urban concrete environment. That doesn't solve a lot of those issues here, but it does provide the separation that pedestrians enjoy. They tend to like to be separated from traffic. And I would say that's probably the primary benefit. Also, you can have other types of things and fixtures and road furniture that goes in that zone. But again, for this corridor, those secondary purposes are probably not relevant.
Jen, couple more questions here about just the type of improvements that we're looking to install. We'll start off with a question about what utilities will be installed as part of this project.
Stormwater. So the collection system for the stormwater within the roadway. So we're going to have catch basins. We're going to have the main pipe, any connections to side drains that are coming from the side roads will also be connected to the main system. And then any facilities that we need to be providing, water quality facilities or flow control facilities, depending on the selected alternative.
And then I would say Sammamish Plateau Water and Sewer District also is looking at upgrading their facility, their sanitary sewer. And I don't have the details of that project, but it's part of their long-range plan. And so that's something we'll be coordinating with them.
Great. You answered the next question we had teed up there in terms of coordination there to make sure that any future improvements don't result in the road being torn up. So thanks for getting to that, Jed. We're getting down to the end of our questions here. There's one about safety. The question is, folks have seen a lot of accidents over the years on this road, including cars, sliding off the road into the ditches on either side. And what kind of safety barriers could be considered as part of this project, or how would the improvements in general manage those type of safety concerns?
Well, in the downhill lane, the addition of the curbing is an important feature because it redirects vehicles back into the travel path. And it could be an errant driver, or it could be a case of snow. So the idea of people getting stuck in the ditches on the downhill side, that problem is going to go away as part of this project. So that's an important feature. Because we're not putting additional barriers on the other side with this concept, it'll be relying on the existing guardrail. And some of it has been relatively new. It's been updated relatively recently.
Great. Again, we're starting to get to the end here, so just making sure that there's nothing that we haven't already covered. There's a new question about potential streetlight installations, especially if there's a sidewalk going in. Would there be any plans to look into lighting along the corridor?
Good question. We haven't gotten that far yet, but maybe I could. Maria might be able to address that.
No, we haven't looked into that yet. But it depends on what City Council may want to be adding within the corridor. So it's not something that we specifically looked at right now. But it's good feedback if it's important for the residents.
Yeah, some of the I would say that some of the city roads, of course, because the geography, the constraints of the topography are extreme in this case on this corridor, and oftentimes the city streets are a hybrid of kind of a rural look and an urban landscape. Urban landscape, you might have street poles in a landscape strip. That's another idea of urban furniture that would make use of a landscape strip potentially. But in this case, people might feel that it's against the character of the roadway to, light it up, because there's a feeling of it's a natural environment, natural canopy. In other cases, we do have, like on East Lake Sammamish Parkway, we'll have street lights that follow more of a rural design standard where you have street lights that are off of the power poles. And so that's an option. So those are just some of the options that we could explore here. And of course, your feedback is welcome, whether streetlights are an addition that you'd be interested in or would not like to see on this corridor.
In a similar vein to streetlights, there's been a couple of comments and questions about undergrounding power lines. Is that something that's going to be looked at as well, or what do we have for that?
So just generally looking at all of our corridor projects, we don't look at undergrounding. And the reason being is that that cost is on the local jurisdiction, would have to pay for that. PSC would not pay for undergrounding, and it's expensive. And so in one of the options, if we do the full road section, including the planter strip, we'd be impacting the all the PSE poles. Now they do move those at their expense, but that would just be another coordination item and a risk that we would have to manage to make sure that they can locate them in a safe and adequate location as part of construction.
So I think our final two questions here from the same person asking about retaining walls, and then the impact of any retaining walls or other project elements on the critical slide area along Lewis Thompson. So again, the first question there is what types of retaining walls would be looked into with the different alternatives?
So that will depend on the height of the wall. So there are two different types that we can look at, from just simple rock walls, if it's a very short wall, that we're looking into something bigger like a gabion wall or a MSC wall. So there are different options depending on the conditions and the height of the wall that we may be looking at. And we have a structural engineer in the team that, once the alternative is selected, it will start moving through 30%, 60, 90 design. They're going to be working on those wall designs.
And then similar question, or I guess kind of a segue from that, is whether any of the improvements as part of this project could change the designation of Lewis Thompson Road from a critical slide area to potentially not being deemed a critical slide area.
If I understand the question correctly, I don't think that would be the case, because I think the topography and just the natural forms are not going to be altered. What we're going to be doing is making the road prism durable and secured, and making sure that we're not getting erosion and sediment and scouring. So that would mean that the road would not be having additional impact, but the landform itself and its disposition will remain, unfortunately.
And to add to that, I'm not a geotechnical engineer. We do have a geotechnical engineer in the team, and they have been assessing at a preliminary level the slopes, and it appears that there's a lot of groundwater also movement within our project area, and that's not something that contributes to the instability of the slopes, and it's not something that we're going to be directly changing or something that can be easily changed. So I would agree with Jed that with what we're doing here is we're ensuring that the corridor is stable, that our improvements are stable, that we're stabilizing anything on the north side that we might be cutting into, but we're not planning anything on the south side currently that will change that designation.
Great. Okay, I think there's just two questions remaining. Again, thank you everybody for sending in these questions. We've gone through about 25 of them so far. So thanks everyone for sending them in. Last two questions here are about property impacts. First one is what type of improvements, specifically about safety, would be made for driveways and driveway exits. And then the second question is more general, kind of how the improvements as part of this project could impact property values.
Okay, so I'll start with that. In terms of driveway getting in and out, we want to hear about your issues. Right now, we're really focused on what cross-section do you want, but the engagement is not going to end once council makes that determination. Once we know what council is willing to commit to, we're going to know the types of impacts we're going to have on the driveways. And from there, we can look in more detail. We'll be requesting your feedback in that forum to look at the very specific things that you're experiencing. I'm imagining maybe sight distance around corners and things like that. And so we would have to look at where our walls are located, and then even the landscaping, if we were to have planter strips, and making sure that we allow for sight distance. Partly because of the tight corners, there are limitations in what you can do. The landform has been set, and there's only so much that can be done with retaining walls to allow that visibility, but that's something that we'll explore further as we get into the 30% design. And then maybe Maria, if there was another part of the question that I forgot, property values. you know, I think, I don't know that it would have an impact on property values. I'm not an expert in that. I don't think it would decline. And if we are going to have an impact on a property, then that's something we look at. If we purchase property, it's going to be a small, it's going to be a small acquisition in order to construct walls for sidewalk. But generally having amenities on the road near your home is not a negative. So I wouldn't expect that there'd be large issues. But again, that will be looked at by land professionals that would do an assessment of what the take is and what the city can offer as compensation. I hope that answered that. And I don't know if Maria has anything to add related to driveways.
No, I think you covered me with your answer, Jed.
Great. Well, we've come to the end of our list of questions that folks sent in. Thanks again, everybody, for sending those. Hopefully you found that useful. If things come up, if you close out of the meeting tonight and you said, boy, I really wish I would have asked that question, down at the bottom of this slide here, we've got Jed's email. Encourage you to send questions along to him and or give him a call, and we can work to respond to those. The other thing we've got going right now is our design alternative survey. So between now and May 13th, again, you may have already seen this, but we've got our design alternative survey up on the Connect Sammamish website. The address is on the page there. You can also sign up for project updates so you don't miss the next one of these meetings. And as Jed noted at the beginning, we'll be using the feedback that you all shared here as well as through that design alternative survey to carry forward and inform upcoming decisions as this project continues to come together. So I'll pause there. Jed, Maria, any final closing words before we let folks out to dinner?
I would add, I did see that as some of the questions went through that people had problems with the QR codes, or if you're viewing on a phone and it wasn't intuitive how to connect, in that case on the QR code. Essentially, the online survey, you can provide your comment in text and with a similar type of selection of the alternatives at this Connect Sammamish online. And if you can't remember that or screen capture that, you can just go to the city website and search for Lewis Thompson, and you can get to Connect Sammamish, and in the first paragraph there's a link to the survey. And so please get your comments in by May 13th. Also, if you feel like you would like to participate more, again, May 17th is our council meeting where council will be looking at this feedback. We'll be presenting this. It's also an opportunity for you to provide public feedback in that forum as well. And the Friday before, it'll be published on the city website under government agendas and meetings. And if you click on the calendar, you'll see instructions on how to leave feedback that'll be presented to council at that meeting, either recorded public comment or other alternatives.
Great. We'll see a couple folks thanking us for the meeting here tonight. Again, really appreciate all of you spending a little bit of time on this Thursday evening with us. Hopefully this was useful. Again, please feel free and follow up if you've got additional questions. But that's what we had for tonight. And again, really appreciate everybody being here.
Yes, thank you everyone for attending and providing your feedback during this meeting, but also through the survey. It is very valuable for the city and also for the consultant team to receive your feedback.
Yep. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.